We are live.
All right. Hello, everyone. And welcome to Lighting the Torch. My name is Candace Miles, but I go by Coach C. And what I do is I support Black millennial and Gen Z women who are stepping into those entry level leadership roles for the very first time with the resources and the confidence they need in order to hop into the driver's seat of my career. But my co-host here that is joining me on this series, this Fireside series, I'll let her introduce herself. Cynthia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cynthia Haley. As you can see, I am Tip Energy Coach, founder and owner of Transition to Infinite Possibilities, where I specialize in guiding corporate professionals to reach new heights in their careers through targeted leadership, through career readiness, and I do it with a little bit of a twist. I also focus on elevating energy levels through a unique blend of career and energy management coaching that helps individuals just thrive both professionally and personally. So I'm ready to get into this, Candace. I'm so excited to partner with you as we are lighting the torch, and it's Women's History Month.
That part. It is Women's History Month. So, y'all, like Cynthia said, we are lighting the torch. Not too long ago, Cynthia and I, we were chatting and we had this whole idea of how our different generations that are out there, they bring something special to the table. Each of them having different perspectives. In some senses, like lighting a flame. Like you'll have some of those who come along where you are going to either light their torch to get them going, or you'll have the time where you're going to light somebody else's torch by collaborating and making their flame even bigger. So that is what lighting the torch is and what came about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so excited about it. When we think about lighting the torch and this fireside chat series, the goal, what we're really focused on is, fostering a deeper understanding and appreciation of diverse perspectives. We are two generations. Candace, what's your generation again?
Millennials.
Yes. And what's mine? I'm Gen X. You see?
If we got any millennials, go ahead and drop your generation in the chat.
Yes. Tell us what generation you are. I am Gen X. But again, back to the goal. We want to highlight the different perspectives of workforce generations. And by shining a light on this, we get to highlight experiences, different perspectives, how you add value, how you make contributions in the workplace simply by way of having this generational mindset, generational concept that we are going to explore by way of different topics. And so through this series, we look to inspire and empower individuals to just engage by lighting each other's torch and in sharing knowledge, mentorship, and support for other generations. So we are collaborating together here, and we want to collaborate with you as a collective resource as we become more innovative in the workplace. So this is a phenomenal kickoff launch to this series, and we are certainly excited about it. I am. Are you, Candace?
I am. But what we gonna be talking about today? It's her story month. What are we going to be talking about today?
Today. So as you can see, the title is Elevating Women's Well-Being in the Corporate Realm. And the one thing that comes to mind is code switching. But before we actually dive into code switching and share our own stories and experiences and what we think of it, let's talk about what code switching actually means. Okay. So when I looked it up, I found this article, Candace, on betterup.com, and they had a great definition. I'm just going to read what it says. It says code switching is the ways in which a member of an underrepresented group consciously or unconsciously adjust their language, syntax, grammatical structure, behavior, and appearance to fit into the dominant culture. So when we think about women, oftentimes in the corporate realm, who's the dominant culture?
The man.
Men, right? In a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, now granted, we have made a lot of progress over the years, but I don't want to, ignore the progress we've made as women. But in corporate spaces, the dominant culture is men. And so oftentimes we as women, we find ourselves having to code switch. What are your thoughts, Candace? What do you think about that definition?
I agree with it if I were to take it and put it in my own terms, since
Yeah.
I am representing the millennials out here. I would say like code switching, when I think about it, it's essentially like playing dress up back in the day where you dressed up, but instead of, physically dressing up, sometimes it is physically dressing up, but it's really dressing up your personality to adapt to whoever you're speaking to. Granted, yes, I understand that there are times that we do have to make sure that we're speaking the language, because that is a part of effective communication,
Yeah.
is that you want to make sure the person you're talking to is receiving it. But I guess I kind of want to play a little bit of devil's advocate here a little bit,
Go for it.
because I think also too, instead of code switching having such a negative connotation to it, it's also too a superpower. If
Ah,
you think about it, not everybody is flexible. If the ability to be flexible in that sense. Um, I kind of think it's both the best of both worlds. Like, yes, I hate it's very toxic, especially when it comes to the. I think we talked about the other day where I read this Essence article where it said like Black employees are having to code switch more and more, and it's impacting their well being. However, on the flip side of it, if we change the mindset a little bit when we are code switching and see it as a superpower, not everybody can do it.
that's true. Almost like a chameleon, right? Like it depends on your environment and you're having to adjust. And you just got to hope that while you're out there in the wild, you don't get caught up,
That
right? you know? So, code switching can have that positive spin like you just gave it. But I think where it resonates for a lot of people, it can be tiring.
that part.
It's exhausting, right? And when you think about women having to go into the workplace, they have to think about, do I have on the corporate dress?
Mhm.
Am I speaking the corporate language? Am I, promoting myself in a way that's going to be accepted by others, right? Am I coming across passive or aggressive? Your mind is spinning and focusing on all these things trying to fit into this cultural norm that you lose sight of yourself, and
Yeah.
I can tell you personally, as I was preparing for this, I thought about an experience early in my career, and I was told by a leader, if you want to move up, you're going to only need to wear blue, black, or gray.
That's boring. Those are the colors I stay far away from when it comes to my attire.
Absolutely. And me back then, I was definitely the one wearing bold colors, bold patterns, what have you. And I had a leader that said, not if you want to move up. So that was a way of having to
What was
conform
their
and just
sorry?
mm-hmm.
What was their reasoning for that?
That was just a way of, hey, you know what? As actually, when I think about it, it's a generational thing. You know, it it um it just one of those things where I feel like my leader at that time, I would say she was a boomer, right? And so you think about that mindset, and historically, what did you see in the workplace? You saw navy blue suits, black suits, that was it. If you saw gray, that was pushing it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not to get political, but it's like when Barack Obama wore tan, the world went crazy, right? So, so
But
you know,
but you know what too? Because that was something that I had to actually research, and it actually showed like if you Google great leaders, they typically have still those colors on, and it's all generations that have it in those pictures sometimes.
yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, who we got? Are we are we moving along here with our technology? We doing pretty good? How we feeling?
Anyone else? Yeah, how y'all feel about code switching?
And if you're just joining or if you're trying to catch up, we are focused on women, their well-being in the corporate space with our first topic around code switching. What it is, how it impacts us as women in the corporate space, how we're constantly having to adjust to fit in. And by definition, fit into the dominant culture. And what we can say the dominant culture in corporate is men,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, like I told you, my boss told me to wear blue, black, or gray. I couldn't do that. You see, I still have my bright orange. I would wear this today. I wear any color. So, but what are your thoughts, Ken? How do you think women tend to show up um, when they are, impacted by this code switching? It can have an emotional toll, on you, physical, the whole nine. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it all shows up too sometimes where similar to what you were just talking about when we what we wear.
Mm-hmm.
Like even though I remember I had this friend at this one time where they went from wearing bright colors to wearing black, but they were going through something but didn't notice that happened. And I feel like that's just in general. Like
Yeah.
you don't even notice that your style may have changed because you're low key having to switch up
Mm-hmm.
every. I'm not even going to be like every other day. It's every day sometimes when it comes. I can't. Yes, when I first got
Mm-hmm.
into leadership, granted it was a mom and pop startup and everything like that. I was rocking overalls, uh, a striped white shirt with an orange blazer and combat boots. No, that
Mm,
wasn't corporate, but that to me at that point in time, like that was my style. That was me, but I was constantly like, kind of, hey, that's different.
yeah.
But that, hey, that's different has something behind it. Like it wasn't just, oh, hey, girl, that's different. Like I like that. No, that hey, different had that doesn't fit into what our norm is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes it hard for new people coming in, especially like women trying to be authentically who they are,
Mm-hmm.
trying to mold or thinking that they have to mold in order to get ahead.
Right. Right. What about here's one I'll tell you that I experienced: the diminishing of your accomplishments. Right. And what I mean by that is I was once given feedback to say, don't let them know how smart you are. Again, that gives the dominant culture a leg up, right? So you're having to kind of minimize your contributions and your worth, your value to fit in once again, and that code switching, that having to not really be your authentic self is toxic. And it just creates, mind games, as some may call, imposter syndrome, right? And you start second guessing yourself, you're doubting yourself. It's, can I be this person? I know I'm smart, I know I'm capable, but I can't let them know it. Could you imagine?
Yeah. So how did that affect you mentally, like your well-being going
Oh,
through that?
oh man. You could say sleepless nights, right? Not getting the proper rest because you're up, your mind is spinning. Your mind is constantly spinning. Okay, I have this meeting tomorrow. I know that I have to go in there, but ugh, do I stay quiet? Do I speak up? Do I um, share my perspective? Do I give suggestions? How many suggestions do I give? So your mind is racing when you should be resting. And and then think about it, when you don't get enough rest,
It's a
you could either
snowball.
be, yeah, you could either show up angry, you could show up moody, you could, not be focused. Your health starts to be impacted. And, let me get back to the question of I, right? I have this habit of saying you. And in the words of Ayala Van Zant, what about you? Focus on you, right? So I lacked sleep because my mind was racing, in how do I still show up professional? How do I still move on this success train while minimizing what I have to offer? And so it was a balancing act, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I say, if anyone is experiencing that, one of the things that I would say I started to do was really um, start to balance how I interjected, my thoughts. And it's also pacing that interjection, pacing how I'll go about phrasing
Mm.
perspective, right? And one of the tips too is, what's the headline? What do I want people to know right up front? Capture the attention and then say what I need to say, but be succinct yet thorough. It makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, what Cynthia is saying, every single sign, if you are experiencing those signs, like your well-being is being impacted. Um, as you were talking, it made me think about what I was reading earlier about this whole lazy girl term, and Gen Zers are using it.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked into it, and so even with you saying that, and I may be saying it in the wrong way because that is not my era, but like it's you have like get it into place of, hey, this is a lazy girl job,
Yeah.
meaning that whole I clock, oh, my shift is from 9 to 5, not 1 minute
Mm-hmm.
over, to
Yeah.
put those. And essentially what they're saying is like, we are setting boundaries, which I think is really what is really good when it comes to your well-being as a woman, is that you have to set those boundaries.
Yes. Set the boundaries. And I'll also say, learn the power of building good relationships.
And the power of no.
The power of no as well, right? But think about it. Look, here's this generation kicking in. There's saying no, there's how to say no.
Look, I'm very direct. No, no,
This is
no.
real
And this,
thing, right? Because you're right. The dynamics are changing.
mhm.
When the Gen Zers and everyone else that's coming along, they're like, no, that's it. I'm not doing it.
Well, yeah, the attitude, like,
Right.
I don't need all this in your neck at work. Like, no, I understand you have boundaries, but yeah, I get what you're saying when it comes to
Right.
that.
So, you can avoid or combat the toxicity of code switching in your own way, right?
Hmm.
Still show up authentically, um, and still be successful in your career without damaging your career, if that makes sense as well.
Yeah. So who would you say, like, who has been a major influence for you when it comes to your career?
Oh, oh, I'm sorry, this thing logged me out. Um,
Yeah, we're trying to multitask over here.
there we go. All right. I'm sorry, Candace. I got so distracted. Look, this is generational. This whole multitasking thing is definitely generational. So I'm hoping we get this going again. All right. I think I got it. So yes, just don't ask me to be just looking back and forth generational. All right. So getting back to the question, who influenced me?
Mm-hmm.
Question. When I think about that, I think personally and professionally. And professionally, well, let me start personally actually. I'm going to always say my mother, right? My parents. But from a woman's perspective, I'm going to lean in and say my mother. And by one, always focusing on faith, right? When you're walking into these spaces, not being consumed with fear, anxiety, overwhelm, and knowing that our steps are ordered, right? And that we lean not into our own understanding. And so there's that spiritual foundation. And then also watching my mother navigate, even in the educational school system. She was a kindergarten teacher, a retired kindergarten teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but watching navigate those challenges as I was growing up while raising a family, those kind of values that get instilled as you're growing up, they carry forward in your professional life, right? Um, my career, I'm thankful to say I won't call out any names because Lord, I will fear missing someone, right? Because I'm very thankful to say that I've had quite a few women along the path. Starting out, I will never forget my very first step in management. I didn't know, I really didn't know what I was going to be doing, right? Like what I
Mm-hmm.
was stepping into. I had to manage process and people very first thing, and I was going into a troubled team, so to speak, right? Low performance, and I had to rebuild a team. And thankfully, there was a woman in my corner who said, mm-mm, come with me, let me help you. Gave me a book, gave me tools, gave me coaching, gave me mentoring, and stood by my side, to really help me navigate these new waters. And thankfully, there have been women along the way who've also helped me um, move in my career, right? Um, but there's one I'm going to say where I had an ally, was a man. I had a male leader, uh, a white male leader, who truly believed in me enough to help me catapult my career, right? Like go from doing one thing to doing something completely new and trusting in my ability to be successful in this space, right? And I share that because not only do we need women supporting women, but we need allies supporting women. And from personally my mother, professionally some women from helping me navigate these leadership ranks, and even to an ally, have been very instrumental for me. What about you? Get off my soapbox there. What about you?
I feel like, want a tissue? Get the tissue.
Name drop, but I don't want to do that.
I think for me, when it comes to influencing, my mom, I think that I think a lot of people are like, hey, my parents. Um, for me, like my grandpa, I found this out recently when it came to like business wise. In my family, we've always been in like the education fields.
Mm-hmm.
And so my grandpa, I found out over Christmas with him, he's 80, he'll be 84 this
Mm,
year. And
yeah.
so you have men that are in their 60s that come back and they've been telling my grandpa, like, Coach Miles, if it wasn't for you, this and that, even though he was in the education and sports field, I just realized like he has such a pivotal influence on my life growing up where I'm literally taking the baton from coaching to
Mhm.
coaching in this realm. I'm taking upon the baton from him because for him he felt like back then, in the 60s, let's just keep it real, like there was still that civil rights movement that was happening. So he
Right.
was teaching those black men that was on his team to show up differently, to
Mm,
act a certain way, and to disrupt what people thought of when it came to black men. And
mm,
essentially, like, that's what I'm doing when it comes to the corporate field is,
right.
hey girls, be yourself. Like, I want you to be and disrupting with the normalized. But I say all that to say, like, my papa is what I call him. But the other one I would say would be my VP. I thought about this earlier. My VP from my when I first got into leadership influenced me in the way of understanding to put the like she put herself first. When we
Yeah.
went through a leadership transition, when there was new leaders coming in to help grow the organization, it did not meet with her values, and she decided to leave
Mm.
because it had become very it's and Einstein looking back, it became like very toxic for her and her well-being.
Oh.
And so that also too has influenced me to understand, like, even with me taking the jump, last year to leave corporate, thinking
Mm-hmm.
about thinking about how she did it and how she actually put herself first, and understanding that this no longer is for me, really influenced me. Now that I think, looking back, you
Yeah.
don't know in that moment. In that moment, of course, I'm like, oh, why are you leaving? Like,
Yeah. That's a
we
bold move, right?
it's a
It's
bold.
courageous.
Yeah.
It's courageous, but you know, as we're talking about well-being, sometimes you have to make courageous moves for the betterment of your well-being, and it's a faith walk, right?
Mhm.
For sure, it's a faith walk, and um, got to make smart decisions. Make, of course, I wouldn't tell anyone just go quit like that, but if it's for you, if it works for you, one, that's prayer. One, you have a good support system. Um, then by all means, you do what you need to do for you,
Mhm.
right? Because at the end of the day, nobody else is going to, right? And it's critical that you look out for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can be scary, but you got to look out for yourself.
Yeah. And understand whatever those signs are. Go back and reflect over what are some patterns that is happening that's
Yeah.
causing me to throw off my sleep, like you said earlier, that's causing me to feel a sense, honestly, anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to vacationing. I remember going on vacation and just thinking, as my vacation is ending, like, I'm going to come back to over 1,000 emails
Mm.
that I'm gonna have to respond to. And
Yeah.
that in itself is like stressful because now I'm moving from the present. of enjoying time away to back in work. I'm not gonna sit
Mm,
there and say it's changed, but like back to my, the job, like my my job.
yeah. Well, my dear, we have, you know, those people who've helped us and shaped our way of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
supported us in those environments where um, we felt emotionally drained because of the need to fit the mold, right? What I would say is for women supporting women, we need to do more of that, right? But let's talk about what it looks like because I can tell you what it doesn't look like, but I can also tell you what it looks like. Like I gave the example of the woman who she helped me getting into management, right? Um, it can also look like championing for you in these meetings when you're not there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when your voice can't be heard, they're in the room championing for you. And I think that is very, very critical. And
Mm-hmm.
so, there we go. Technology, my goodness, it takes us around and around. But I tell you what, this conversation is needed,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's one of those things where we don't talk enough about how we as women can support each other, but also the challenges that we face in the corporate space that affect our well being. We're busy trying to climb, maybe navigate, and in some instances, just merely thrive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um,
Yeah.
and we need to talk about it more. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation. But like I said, women supporting women, it can look like being that voice, being that champion when you're not in the room. Um, it can also be, you ever had this situation? Let me paint the picture. Been in a meeting where you're sharing your perspective and it seems like no one's listening or no one's gravitating or no one's accepting of your input.
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel when another woman or someone else, chimes in and says, "No, Candace, actually, I agree with you." Or, "Candace, you make a great point. Let's think about it this way. How would you feel if, but not making you feel less than in these spaces, right? And that's another way women can support women when they see um, certain behaviors happening to jump in, right? To not just let it slide, to actually be there to support you um, real time,
Mm-hmm.
not later on behind closed doors. Now, granted, I just said you want to champion when you're not in the room, you do, but it also feels good when you're in the same room that you know you have the support.
Listen, that makes us feel like they got our back.
Yep.
That's what it makes it feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can, and I know if I've talked about this before, but a new audience to talk to. But I know for sure for me, like I recall going through something very traumatic for me in leadership
Mm-hmm.
and having to basically basically fight the battle by myself. And without, like, as soon as fire started happening, it was like, oh, oop, all hands off.
Yeah.
But that was the opportunity to be an ally and advocate and support another woman, understanding that when you really peel back the layers, this that's being said about me is not accurate because you know my character and my integrity. But because whatever reason, as far as like face value, oh, I can't be associated with this, whatever the decision was in the way that, you know, they moved and whatnot, you know, that's all on them.
Yeah.
However, like that to me was a situation where I went through that I felt like I was on an island by myself because I couldn't say anything. I couldn't talk to anyone about it. The only person I will say I talked to at the time was my mentor, who would send me prayers in the morning, who would check on me throughout the day just to say, hey, are you okay? Because, you know, in that too, even when the last day that I decided that I was leaving, called and said and told me, we failed you as a leader. Because they forget that even though you have a leadership title, so I'm talking to all my people leaders out there. If you are a people leader, you are still an employee. Yeah. And it's your boss's duty for them to protect you just like you protect your team. Right. And in that moment, like for my mentor to tell me like, we failed you as a leader, when I say I boo-hooed. Oh, because like that's all I wanted to hear, you know, and I didn't know I needed to hear that. Yeah. But the moment that she said that, I said, this is what support looks like. This is what support looks like emotionally, because we're still humans. Yes, we work at these corporations. Yes, you may have this title. Again, I'm talking to all my people leaders out there, regardless of what title you're at or level you're at. You're still an employee. You still have feelings, and it's in those moments where if someone is your leader who happens to be a woman, this is where they can support you.
You know, it's as you tell that story, what came up for me is current events. We're living in a society now that has deemed diversity and inclusion as a bad word, or diversity and equity as a bad word, right? And when you think about the diverse nature of women and women across generations, there's a certain level of understanding and awareness that needs to happen in the workplace. And I know we're probably going to talk about this in another fireside chat, but women experience things, whether it's code switching or any other mental, physical need or challenge that our male counterparts may not be able to understand. But lacking awareness or the willingness to gain awareness is going to just further present challenges. And it's like, it's almost like I really wish people would be more open to learning, right? And assessing their own bias.
I said, be a forever student.
Yes, exactly. And being aware of your own biases. You know what I mean? Because as they say, we have unconscious biases, right? Because you have this male dominance, a lot of times you come into a room with the stature, with the build, with the tone, with the presence that is very domineering, right? Are you welcoming in your female counterparts? Are you inclusive of the women in the room? Are you letting their voices be heard, or are you excluding them from the conversation?
Or trying to mansplain. I learned that from my instructor last year. She said that terminology. I said, I love that. I've never heard of it before. But, you know, mansplaining.
What that is, because that might be some new stuff, Candace.
Mansplaining, like when you're sitting there and so basically if I said something and someone comes after me and says the exact same thing I said, but they basically say, oh, what Candace is trying to say, or what Candace said was, no, I said what I said.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. Trying to clean it up.
Trying to, no. And I had to get to a point where understanding, even with that, like that also too can diminish like your confidence, someone constantly feeling the need to do that. And it's like, no, like that's it, either that's a growth opportunity for me,
Right.
and let's talk about it, or it's let me re-explain, give me an opportunity to re-explain and check the room and see, did y'all not understand what I said? Because before anybody can say they didn't understand, people are constantly, oh, what Candace is trying to say. No.
Right.
But
Said what I said.
but I think too, like you were talking about, like the whole DE&I thing, I'm gonna bring my little Beyonce up in here. But even too, the diversity, the whole I'm not diversity, but that too, but the controversy that's going on with her stepping into that genre. And basically she's saying my experience caused me to do this.
Right.
Let's not think about it being a genre. She is literally talking about my experience because I did not feel welcomed.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing that it should be like. That's the biggest thing that people should be paying attention to and understanding. To your point, when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and all of that, it does hurt our mental as women. When we are constantly feeling like we have to fight.
Yes.
That we have to continue to push forward, when if we had another woman, and I talk to other cultures, some of you all that have not walked women of color's footsteps, to reach back. And I mean, not reach back in the way that you think to reach back, but reach back in the sense of, you know what? Let me talk to them and listen. Don't listen to respond, listen to hear exactly what we're saying. Then that's when we can really start seeing some diversity and inclusion. Like we talked about yesterday, D&I, when it emerged, of course, it emerged during the whole George Floyd, during COVID and everything like that. A lot of companies wanted to do it. But when you really looked at it, it took a decline because there really wasn't anything happening with them other than someone having a title.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when it comes to that, but I just think that we just really have to, like, we're powerful together, not just from culturally, not just generationally. We are powerful together, and we can really move things forward when we allow our biases, our stereotypes, what society has taught us, and start breaking that. But it all starts with a conversation.
That, and you segued into, the impacts on Black women. When we're talking about women supporting women, we need more of our Black women supporting women also. True. Right. And because I've seen the good and I've seen the not so good, even in that space. And there's power in numbers. Or you say, as women, as a collective, if we could stand strong and truly support each other, Black women as a collective, if we stand strong and truly support each other, that's a force to be reckoned with. Right. But not only that, sometimes you need the ear. You need someone who can relate. You need someone who is willing to understand and help you navigate these different spaces. So what I would say, as we get close to, wrapping this up too, when we think about examining our well-being in the workplace, we have to consider the mental piece of it, right? When we think about that emotional toll, we think about mental fatigue. You ever just feel like your brain is tired and so you just want to watch mind-numbing TV, right? It's, you think about imposter syndrome, all of these things, being really conscious of our mental well-being, as well as our physical well-being, because when we don't take care of the mental, it affects our physical.
Mhm.
We start to experience stress, anxiety, burnout, that leads to other health concerns, whether it's heart health. Um, Personally, I experienced so much stress one time until I ended up with Bell's palsy. And I know it was workplace stress related. You know, yeah, there was things happening in life, but the 80% was work. And until we can really take um, take in some awareness around how the workplace affects us mentally, we won't have a grasp on our physical, right? And so there's mental, there's physical, but then thinking about just socially, and because think about also when you're so drained from the space at work, you don't show up well at home or in other social settings because you're too tired in some cases, right? Or you have strange relationships that make it harder to have the positive relationships. And so you start to second guess yourself, like, okay, well, gosh, this person didn't accept me as I am. I don't know if this person is going to accept me as I am, right? um there's so many facets around our well-being that we really need to take stock in, right? Understand what's happening, how it's affecting us, and then take action to address it.
All right. So I heard that's your little tips, your advice. So I hope you all wrote that down as some tips when it comes to, because when we're doing these series, yes, we want to talk about topics, but we also too want to give you some practical tips for you to take away and not just be out here just listen to us talk. um I would agree for sure, like with everything you're saying. um Even to add on to the social piece, if you have something that you love doing, like I noticed for myself, I stopped dance. Like I love dance. That gives me joy
Ah,
just to dance and to take dance classes and stuff like that. And I noticed I stopped doing that.
mm,
So if you, to add on to what Cynthia said, like your hobbies that make you happy, what is bringing you joy, like true, not happiness, like joy, like that
mhm,
joy of a kid, that childlike joy, like to
yeah,
go back to that whenever you are going through the whole well-being. And to me also too, because I am spiritual, like meditating, getting in your word, like some of that stuff is definitely, for me, it has been that's definitely grounding. So whatever your beliefs are, but for me, for sure, like getting into that and making sure that that's aligned, because most of the time when your well-being is off, everything is off.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I can tell you, and those are things that individuals can do,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say organizations, right? Organizations need to definitely be cognizant of feedback across demographics, right? Sometimes we look at feedback collectively, but we don't assess it from a demographic perspective. And in some cases, that's because you don't have enough intel, data to really slice it. But for what you do have, you need to assess it and see how are employees experiencing their leaders, and do you see a discrepancy amongst women
Mm-hmm.
versus men? What are you hearing from your women at work? And most organizations do have women employee resource groups and things of that nature. Another thing organizations can do is rally for men to be part of those. Just because it says women employee resource group, men can join in and be an ally. They can learn, they can start to hear the experiences of women and then contribute to making it better because they stand in a position where they can have influence.
Mm-hmm.
So join in those types of conversations to really understand and make an impact.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot because every culture is different,
Right.
and you can't look at it holistically and say, "Oh, hey, here's the solution." You know, when it comes to well-being, I don't know why when you were talking about it made me, of course, think about George Floyd. That impacted cultures differently.
Yeah.
How, what did corporations put in place? What did they do to help to make sure everyone was okay?
Yeah.
Because you don't know, like something that was that traumatic that everybody saw, what was done to put in place to make sure that your employees are okay, to understand that they care when it comes to, since we are talking about Women's History Month, mothers, in that situation where they may have put themselves in the situation where they're like, that could have been my son.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right. We had a lot of that. I saw a lot of that. The concerns of mothers.
yeah.
And how then you think about how they show up at work distracted, right? But that doesn't equal poor performance.
No, it's a
Equals
moment.
life.
It is a moment. It's an anomaly. That's the what
Mhm.
you should put it. It's like, don't automatically put this on someone's, don't automatically put on somebody's yearly annual when they had a moment.
Right.
That, because once you start doing stuff like that, now you're put in a place where you're weaponizing what they were going through, because they were going through life,
Mhm.
and penalizing them,
Yeah.
which is going to impact them even more, because now they're gonna feel like, well, I can't say anything, I can't show up, I can't act like life is happening, because life be life, and it happens to all of
And then
us.
you're forced to code switch. You
Yes.
know.
Like, oh, I'm okay. Hey, how you
Mhm.
doing? Good, in you? Good, in you?
Good.
Hey, I got that down. How you doing? Good. Fine, in you?
I'll have to tell you a story later about that and you part. I think I was probably like 12 or 13, and people would ask, and I would just say fine, and my mother would say, "And you." I always say, "And you." So I told you she was the influence. Coming up, she was the influence. Don't just say fine, say fine, and you.
I'm telling
Um,
you.
but yeah, we there's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to do, and I think let's go back full circle, right? When we started this conversation, we started by introducing this fireside chat series as lighting the torch.
Mm-hmm.
And we just talked about women supporting women, Black women supporting Black women, our allies supporting women. Let's now talk about, kind of bring it back home, how we can support each other by lighting the torch to the next person. What are your thoughts? I'll let you kind of chime in on that.
On that, um, I'm always thinking about the next coming after,
Mhm.
and lighting the torch is by having dialogue like this.
Yeah.
So it gives them tools in their tool belt to be able to recognize things that I know at 20 years old. No, I wasn't
Mhm.
recognizing this. As I'm quickly approaching 40, I can now like recognize that. And I wish that there were conversations as transparent and authentic like this,
Mhm.
where it would set me up to know that, oh, this is code switching. How is this doing? What is this doing to me? I found out 2 years ago what code switching even was.
Mhm. Mhm.
Imagine if I knew that back then,
Right.
and saw like the impacts, because once I found out about that, it made me think about every situation that I would do that.
Yeah.
So lighting the torch would be for the next coming after, understanding that code switching, yes, it has its perks, its positives and negatives. However, for me, I believe that it can be changed where you don't have to code switch,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
you can show up authentically you, where I don't come in the morning saying, hey, Cynthia, how are you? And then later I'm like, girl, did you? No.
Oh, why
I
do I have to say good morning every morning?
like it should come to a place where I really believe like it'll get to a place and at some point where people can really show up authentically as themselves, not be viewed as being unprofessional,
Yeah.
not being viewed as being, all the negative terminology because it doesn't fit the norm of society,
Mm-hmm.
but really show up authentically as themselves using their own dialect. I learned that earlier last month
Yes.
is that if I use slang, that's dialect of my culture. That doesn't mean I'm uneducated. That's just the dialect that we use when we communicate. So if I use it in a professional setting, that doesn't mean I'm unprofessional. That's my dialect.
Mm-hmm. Oh, trust me, I know about dialect. I've
You know,
had to clean mine up a few times. I felt the need to clean it up. Let me say that.
there's certain words now. Let's be honest, certain words you can't say. We don't put that
Right.
out there.
But
But
dialect to me was, I'm from the low country of South Carolina. I'm from Orangeburg, South Carolina. And our dialect may be a little different. When I started working at TIAA, I'll never forget, it was like the swarm of New Yorkers came in. And I got constantly, what you say? Now, mind you, I'm probably like, I don't know, 23 years old or so, right? And it's like, what did you say? What did you say? What did you say? Because my dialect was really strong. And even then, I felt the need to, okay, be very cognizant of how I articulate myself, right?
mhm.
But uh, there are times where I'm like, listen, this, especially if I'm passionate, you're just gonna get what you're gonna get. It might come on out, but and I'm not ashamed of it.
Mhm.
Whereas the 24, 25-year old was like, gosh, I need to mask it a little bit in order to fit into this dominant culture, right? But getting back to lighting the torch, when I think about lighting the torch, I'm thinking about similar to what you said, right? Taking my experiences that have helped shaped me to become a better person, a better woman, a stronger woman, a more successful professional. It's taking these experiences that have shaped me and helping to shape the next generation or the next person. And not being ashamed of sharing the good and the bad,
Mhm.
right? Being vulnerable, being transparent, and taking this torch and say, hey, I've been able to move the needle in this capacity. I'm going to take what I've learned, I'm going to take my experiences, and I'm going to pass that torch to you because I want you to now shine. I want you to now take this and you shape and mold it however you need to so that it is still you who shows up. But you now have some insight, you now have some learnings around what you can do and how you can do it differently to be a better you. And
Mhm.
that's how I see lighting the torch.
Yeah. I also want to add to that. Yes, I talked about the generation coming after, but I also too want to light the torch for those that are ahead of me and understand that your job, just because you may not be my age, you
Mm-hmm.
still are worthy. You still have some wisdom that you can pass. You still, if your limbs are active, you still have work to do.
Your limbs
You
are
just,
active.
if you listen, look, I got an old song. if you still have work to do. It just really has to understand like your transit, like life transitions. And
Yeah.
so as the millennials are coming in, being where the boomers were, you all are transitioning more into like a consultant where you are passing your wisdom to millennials who are teaching the next to Gen Z, who are learning, who is teaching the next to Gen A, who are just getting here.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the life. Like, so I also to think of lighting the torch is also to forward, giving my respect and understanding that your wisdom, even though I may not always agree with some of it, it's still valuable and it's still something that I may be able to do in a modernized way.
Absolutely. They call that, look, in the corporate space, they call that managing up, right?
Yeah.
And that is okay. All
Hmm.
right. Well, we have
All right.
out our time. We are right at an hour. And Candace, I think you and I both know we could probably talk much longer because
Mhm.
we are having a conversation that I feel we're both passionate about,
Mhm.
right? And that passion shows up as we continue to light the torch for the next person. And in this case it's Women's History Month, and we definitely want to light the torch for the next woman.
Mhm.
So you want to close us out, my dear?
All right, y'all. Like she said, we are at time, which means that we had a good time. Okay. Um, but pretty much like what Cynthia just said, we really about this series, it is about lighting a torch. So take whatever nuggets that we had that you felt that this, hey, they are talking directly to me, but take that and go and light somebody else's torch, whether it's somebody behind you, whether it's somebody in front of you, but go and light somebody else's torch, because this series with these two generations, and sometimes we may have more generations on here, but we truly, 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 truly are about Women History Month this month and lighting the torch. So on that note, good night to the East Coast, because I know it's what, 9 o'clock? It's 6 o'clock. Oh, by the way, we are bi-coastal. I'm San Diego.
And I'm North Carolina, Charlotte, Concord, North Carolina. And, as we do close this out, one thing I do want to say is thank you to those who were able to join live. Thank you to those who may watch the replay. And be sure to follow us on social media. But number one, follow us on LinkedIn. Because
Yes.
we are focused on the corporate space and corporate professionals, we want to make sure we capture that audience on LinkedIn. So if you're not there, be sure to get on LinkedIn, and then be sure to follow each of us. Um,
Mhm.
and then, of course, our social platforms. I'm Tip Energy Coach on both Instagram and on Facebook. And then we'll start to share also this live recording will be on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and watch the replay there as well. So again, thank you, thank you, Candace.
Yes. Yes. And my social, let me throw my handles down. My social, I didn't put it right here today, but of course, LinkedIn, Candace P. Miles, MBA, because I do got it and I'm proud of it. Um, and my company is No Gap Consulting. That is my IG. So you can definitely follow me on there, where I am most of the time providing a little more updates on there with reels and everything like that, because I am creative. I do love that space. But you can definitely follow me at No Gap Consulting on Instagram platforms. But here, like Cynthia said, we are really focused on, the corporate space. And if you don't have your LinkedIn updated, this is a way for us to tell you that we are lighting your torch to go do that. So
Absolutely.
let someone else know. But other than that, again, thank you, thank you, thank you. We had a great time. I know I did, Cynthia.
I surely did. I'm ready for the next one. So stay tuned. When we get ready to roll out the next series, we want you to join in, and we want you to join in the conversation. And on that note, I'll say have a good night.
Good night, everybody.